What's up, guys? So welcome back to the Chef RC YouTube channel, and it's gonna be kind of a switch up. Normally I film RC content, but right now I'm starting on this project. So what we got going on here is we're gonna do a Barbie Jeep build, kind of like Grindhard Plumbing Co., just maybe not as custom. So I'm starting off with this Polaris 400 Xplorer frame, but we're gonna start making this a custom build. It's gonna be exciting. Yeah, so I'm sorry I kind of started this video in the middle of the process. My idea was to get the motor rebuilt because that was completely trashed, had a hole in the block. I'll go over that more later, maybe in a separate video. But I figured I'd kind of try and start it when I'm starting the process of building the Jeep. So that's kind of why I'm starting it now instead of later. There was a plate that kind of went up at an angle and held the steering. And that's going to be in the way, so I had to cut that out. And I'm hoping we're going to put a 4-link suspension on the rear of it. And I got to find softer springs for this as far as suspension-wise. That kind of gives you that idea. And then, so there's the seat for it. I don't know if you guys can kind of get the idea, but it's going to be something like that. Now, the handlebars. That's something to cover because those are going to be bent into like an M shape. So it's going to come up, down, center there, up, and back down. And that way it'll be more of like a steering wheel or like a plane yoke is a good way to imagine it instead of like handlebars like that. But yeah, I'm really excited for this. So just tune in. Okay, guys, so here's the idea. You have your seat kind of right here. And then my legs are hopefully going to be like right in this area. Now, I'm hoping that the tires, see, as you can see right now, the tires would hit me. So maybe my legs will have to kind of stay down here, which isn't going to be awful. And the seat might move down and back a little. It'll definitely move down a little bit. It's just going to be a matter of if it moves forward or back, and I just don't know right now. I need to cut out the floor of the Jeep body so I can kind of set it on here. And the Jeep body will be extended. So it's not going to be the same length as that. But I'll have to see how all that turns out. One concern I had was my steering, because I didn't think my steering was going to have this much play in it. I think it's just like a bushing at the bottom, and then you secure it with the little collar up here. And I was worried I was going to have to put a universal joint in here. But with all this play, as you guys can see right here, looks like we're going to be fine, and then you're kind of be steering like this. So it should actually turn out really good, and this is looking really nice. Holy cow, guys, check this out. Here we go. So this is kind of the rough layout. As you can see, you got the seat, gas tank right behind you. And it looks small, guys, but actually that's not going to be too far off from stock capacity. And then this is a 2-stroke. So you're going to have a front oil tank that I'm going to try and make fit under the hood. And I'm trying to think what else. I would try and get on it, but I have a good feeling this thing will fall apart as soon as I try to. And I know the back's leaned up, but that was just the best way I could get it propped up. But I think it's going to turn out pretty neat, guys. Just look at it. Not near as good as Grindhard Plumbing Co.'s by any means. Like, guys, I am not trying to one them up or do anything like that. But you know, they inspired me, so I'm just giving them all the credit. And if anything, I feel like this should be kind of, you know, showing some respect for them, and, you know, just giving them credit for how good they did and inspiring other people like me. But yeah, I really like the way this is going to turn out, guys. So day 2 of working on this thing as far as the actual Barbie Jeep build. And this oil tank sits here. The only problem is it had stands that came up and it was holding this oil tank too high because, as you'll see, this thing is going to sit in there, and I had to do some trimming right in there. And give me just a second. Okay, so there you go. You can kind of see, you'll open the hood, get your radiator cap, and then you got your oil. And that's gonna sit in there. I had to do some clearance trimming up in there, and all over the place to make this thing fit. We're actually gonna take the original brackets and re-weld them on there just shorter, so this thing is maybe just barely hovering off of the metal. And we don't want it much at all because it doesn't have much room in there. But yeah, I'll get you guys on the tripod and I'll try and get this set up to where I have the pieces ready to go, and I'll weld them in. A slight change of plans. I was gonna weld the original brackets on down there, but I found it'd just be easier to just directly bolt to this. Now, yes, I understand that's gonna be a tower, but I'm gonna put washers, and not washers, but spacers is what we'll call them. And that way, it's gonna seem silly, but I wanna powder coat this at some point. So by doing that, this is a flat surface, and stripping this down will be a lot easier and it'll be a lot simpler. So we got the bolt with the washer on top, then a washer sandwiching it, and then 4 slightly bigger diameter nuts. To save you guys some time, I went ahead and just got the other side done. This one's a little bit more finicky because you just have the radiator hose a little bit closer to you, but as you can see, like, I'm shaking the whole dolly and the whole ATV frame before the tank budges, and you can see we've got a little bit of room in the back. Now it is slightly touching on the top or at the front, but that is not going to hurt, guys. So there we go. I'll get the Barbie Jeep mounted on here now. Here, I'll show you guys the clearances. So as you can see from the front, and then it's hard to show right back up in there. There's a little piece. We'll look at it from back here. And it's right up in there. Looks like we're really close. We may have to trim that a little bit more when we go to secure the body down. But tell you what, guys, it looks pretty good. Like with the hood on and everything, it looks pretty darn good. Pop the latches. And there you go. Oil and radiator. Pretty sweet. Okay, guys, here's the steering wheel design I came up with, and sorry for the mowing in the background. Hopefully you can still hear me. But there's one thing that you guys may notice right off the bat, or if the perspective was better. But this handlebar on this side is longer than that one. Now, that kind of happened on accident, but I left it because my thinking is if this is longer, I'm going to have more leverage on my brake handle than if I would and I had the grip right up here. See, I'm going to have more leverage, and I can come down lower and get more leverage on my brakes, which is pretty important. Now, I know I said I was going to do like an M shape, you know, where it comes in the middle, comes down. Now, I didn't do that because I don't necessarily have the tools to do saddle joints, so that's going to kind of be a challenge with this project. But also, with the way that throttle mounts and everything, it would kind of get in the way of that. So by doing just a standard kind of U shape, yes, it may not look quite as good, but the functionality is better. Been about a week or two since the last clip, and since then, as you can see, some things have changed. So I'm finally getting the motor and transmission. I got all that in. Right now, I'm waiting on head studs to get the head of my engine put on. So that's why that bag is, or that paper is over there. But for the most part, it's turning out to be pretty complete. Some things I'm gonna have to do, guys, is right here, this is for the factory airbox, which we are not running. Since we're not running the airbox, I don't need these tabs because this is where my seat's gonna sit. So we're gonna get rid of these lumps. For now, I'm gonna leave this cross member. I could move it, I don't know, because again, this shock's gonna be disappearing. But for sure, these things sticking above the tube needs to go. And then, this is just completely in the future, but since it's right here, this exhaust, the frame's probably gonna get chopped off even with this body mount, which will also be gone. But that means I need to figure something out. So my plan is to chop the exhaust right there, chop the exhaust back there, and re-weld this cap on the end and figure something out with the exhaust spout. Got all those pieces cut off, and now, for the most part, it's flush. Yes, that bracket does stick up, but I'm not too worried about it. And like I say, I'll probably end up moving it. The main thing is now I can easily mock up my seat without it hitting something that's just sticking up briefly. So there we go. So this is day 3 of progress, and as you can see, things have definitely changed. And I apologize for that, guys. I actually kind of have a decent excuse, at least. I've been working on my rear axle, and I was wanting to film some of it, and it's been hot, especially during the weekend, guys. And my phone was overheating trying to film this video and get this filmed, and the battery's just dying so quick. I was like, it's not worth it. Again, I'm doing this mostly for just documentation, but I just made the bar that went across and kind of designated where I wanted these plates to be, which you guys somewhat saw me make those. Not much. Again, guys, my phone was overheating so much I couldn't get much of it filmed, and it's just extremely difficult to film. Right now, the process I'm trying to do is figure out where I want. This is the big deciding factor, guys, that makes your suspension work, is where I'm gonna put the other heim joint to make my linkage. So that's what I'm trying to decide right now. This is day 5 of progress, and so far, not too much has gone on. I've been thinking about how I'm gonna do this axle. I know that's where I left off last time, about how was I gonna do this. And I finally found the center of the four-wheeler. So I measured outside to outside, and then I measured outside to outside where it gets bigger. And since I knew the middle of this, I could just take the difference of that and figure out where the middle was, even though it's offset. And I found out that this frame, the bottom, is offset by 2 inches. So whatever I do to this side, I need to add 2 inches on this side to make things even. And yes, we will double check it before it's all said and done. So I checked this one, and what I ended up doing is I came up with this bracket, which I just got done, guys, and don't worry, you didn't miss out on much. It was a lot of boring stuff, as far as I had to drill a hole, tack weld a nut in, then I had to cut another piece, drill a hole, and then I had to make a piece to fit in between it, and it just turned out like that. Was it supposed to be like that? No. It was supposed to be straight across, but it ended up at an angle. You know what? Who cares? It actually looks all right, and I think it looks pretty good. So, here's the plan. The plan is to completely remove this foot peg, and then simply weld that on down there on the frame. So that is what's going to happen. And on the other side, I'm going to have to make sure that this part right here, again, the distance from the outside of this nut on the other side has to be 2 inches away extra from the frame. So with this plate and this nut, that's about 3/4 inch gap. So that will put this right on the outside edge of this disc brake. So we should be right on the limit. And we will kind of have this more forward so it's in line with that, guys. So you can kind of get an idea. And I just brought this bracket forward more so we had more support on the frame. And for this other side, again, I just got to add an extra 2 inches, and this side's going to be a little more challenging because, as you can see, we have the CVT cover. So we're going to have to get rid of this bracket, somehow come up with a way to come out 2 inches more than that last one, so it'll be 2 3/4 inch out from the frame. And then we'll kind of make the same style bracket and weld it in, and we'll have to make sure that both of them are the same distance from the rear axle or from the front of the four-wheeler, or just from a certain point. That they are 1/4 inch thick steel, going to be plenty thick, plenty strong. And this was the last one I did. You guys can see I was starting to get a good weld on there. Obviously I didn't fill it in at the end. I didn't quite start enough because that's where I first tacked it. But I don't think it's too bad, guys. And just keep in mind, I'm a self-taught welder and, you know, never really looked into how to do it properly. So just bear with me. I know there's going to be some welders who are going to absolutely think that this is atrocious. So I get it. So now that I have my brackets made, it's time to cut the foot pegs off. We're only cutting the rear ones off for now. And these will go on there. The one on the passenger side, I'm saying passenger side, guys, because yes, it's a four-wheeler, but I always like to use driver and passenger side because those do not change depending on how you're looking at the vehicle. If you're looking at the front of the vehicle, you still have, if you're looking at the front of the vehicle, left and right are different than if you're looking at the rear of the vehicle and left and right, if that makes sense. So driver and passenger never get mixed up, and that's why I'm using this. That's why I'm using those terms. But the passenger side has that offset frame, so this will just get directly welded on. But this is on the driver's side, and that frame is not offset. And since the offset is 2 inches, which I believe I've already covered, if I haven't, sorry for that, but the offset is 2 inches, so to simply do that, I just found 2 pieces of pipe. This is the same pipe I made the rear axle out of. It's 1/8 of an inch thick and 1 1/4 inch in diameter. That's going to get welded on, and then I'll have my 2 inch spacing. Now, yes, I do understand that I am limited on my contact on frame, so I am thinking about making a gusset. I have the top of the pipe lined up with the top of the material that I'm going to be welding onto, because this is going to be flush with the frame as far as the top of it. So this will be kind of down lower. This bit will be overhanging, and that is perfectly fine, guys. I was completely aware of this. This is 1.5 inches, and my frame is 1 inch. But anyhow, I'm going to get this welded up, and then hopefully we can start cutting off those foot pegs and get these mounted and start making links. So it's just tacked in right now, and I figured I'd show you guys. I just realized I forgot to turn on the gas, so I ran out on my second tack, and you can easily see the difference between gas or argon and no argon on a weld. So there's my first tack. I still had a little bit of gas left, but then that second one, see how it's all bubbly and pitty? That's because I ran out of gas. But if you look at the one right beside it, I turned on the gas, and now look at it, all smooth again. So that's the simple difference between argon and no argon. Was a complete accident, just figured I'd show you guys, and I'll finish getting this welded up. But first, actually, I realized I want to get my second one on here, and also tacked in. I'm not too worried about getting these fully welded around because, again, this is probably, the welds are going to be plenty strong. But again, we're going to line this up with the edges and the top, this edge and this edge. And I'll go ahead and get this tacked in as well. Now it's tacked in, I'm going to go around and try and get some good welds in, hopefully. Well, there you guys have it. Definitely not the prettiest welds in the world, or not my prettiest ones so far, but they're going to be functional, and that's the main thing that matters. So next up is to get these rear foot pegs removed on both sides. This one's going to be kind of tricky because I don't want to hurt my disc brake. I might take that off, it just depends. But I don't know how much I'm going to really film this, guys, because this is just boring grinding work that's going to take 20 minutes. So I just got the brackets clamped on, guys, and I believe they're aligned. I've done as much measuring as I can, and this axle is under here. I was just checking to make sure the sprocket and everything was aligned, which it sure appears to be, and just double checking, making sure everything's going to look all right before I tack this, well, before I weld it in. But I got the brackets on there. As you can see, I used those tubes for the spacers, like I showed you guys earlier, and then that's going to account for the offset frame. And guys, this is going to work. So again, I've just done as much measuring as I can to double check this, but it's just time to get this welded in. So I just got these brackets tacked in. The other side's tacked in too. And I returned this thing back down the level I had it up, so it was easier for me to get underneath. That's why I had this thing hoisted up so far. But now I just got it returned back to level, which is going to be ride height, essentially. And we're going to roll this axle back in. And what I need to do is I need to figure out how far, like, what I'm going to do now is I need to figure out what I want my wheelbase to be, guys. And once I figure out my wheelbase, I can measure the distance for what I need for my links. And then I can cut them out. So right here, I got this big old pipe. It's the same stuff I use for the axle housing. And as you guys can see, we do have clearance. Don't worry, I have checked this over. And this bracket or this guard for the brake caliper may have to move, and the whole caliper may have to move. But that can change. Mainly, I just want to get my suspension, and that is the main priority, is to get my suspension right, and anything else can just be moved out of the way. So that's what I just need to get done, is I need to figure out my wheelbase, which I'm probably going to be shooting for around 44 to 43 inches, guys, which is about 6 inches shorter than stock, I believe. I recall the stock one's like 50, or maybe it's 48. I can't remember, guys. But I'm going to be shortening it, so I just got to figure a ton of stuff out, and I'll get back with you guys once I get it figured out. Looks like a lot has changed since you last saw it, but it really hasn't, because the brackets are in, like I had talked last time. All I simply did was get my links. I measured where I roughly wanted my axle, and then measured out my links, cut them, welded them, and bolted in. A lot of stuff, it looks like a lot has happened, even though it really hasn't. But yeah, it's looking good, guys. I'm really happy with how it's turning out. I believe our wheelbase is sitting at around 43 inches, and I want to say the stock was either 50 or 48. So we've at least reduced it by 5 inches, which is good. I'm wanting this thing to wheelie, and with it being four-wheel drive, I heard these things kind of struggle. But now I don't think it'll be that bad. But yeah, it's looking good. Now we just got to start on this top link, which what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse the old top trailing arm. Here's the plan for the rear arm, or for the third arm. is I was going to try and use the factory swing arm mount, which is up in there, but that would get in the way of the chain down here because it would just cut across. Especially if you look at it, it's hard to show, but with that tucked in there, it would just be in the way. But if I do it like this, and I bring tabs off the chassis right in there, I think that's going to work, guys. So I'm going to work on making tabs and stuff I can just weld into the frame right on there and there. So I cut the arm off, then I welded just a piece of flat steel all the way across. So I welded one nut to that so it can screw in, and then you have your jam nut here, which you really don't need, but it is there. And now I've kind of raised the four-wheeler up and everything, and it's gonna check out. There'll be a couple clearance issues I'll have to worry about. Nothing too major though, so I'm not too concerned. And the articulation is gonna be just kind of weird, given the fact that it's chain drive, and chains don't like to flex side to side, or twist, I guess would be the better term. It turned out really well, guys, and right now the struggle is trying to find a mount for my suspension, because as you can see, there's not a lot of room in there. So I eventually stuck with the plan is, and I have this thing at an angle right now. There's the level, as you can see it, because I'm trying to account for like the weight of the chassis and everything, and the weight of me on it to get the right height. And I want it to be fairly level, but I've come up with this. So the actual exhaust used to sit right where the top of this is right now, and I cut the mounting bracket off, and so I could fit this under there. And I'm gonna probably have this setting back right near the edge of that link, and then I'll come off probably on the back side, something like this. You can kind of see my fingers. It'll weld on the back, and then it'll come here, and it'll have two clamps that come around like that. So that's the plan for this, and then hopefully that will give me a good ride height. Unfortunately, I don't have much to work with, and I have no clue. All I know about these springs is they came off a 1998 Honda 4Trax, like 300, I think. It's really all I know about it. So I don't really even know the spring rate or anything like that. We're just kind of going to shoot for it. First thing I'm going to do is measure the width of the shock on the bottom. Actually, I don't know which one's... Okay. I got to figure out which is the top and bottom, and I'm going to make a bracket that's probably 1/8 of an inch wider than the shock itself. That way it has a little side-to-side play. And then we'll weld it on to where I want it, and I'll go ahead and do both bottom links while I'm at it. And as you can see, I need to fully weld them in. I just had this tacked up. And then once I get the tabs on both of the links, I'll probably reinstall the links. I'll come over here, and I got to start designing and making the bracket for the suspension. I'm going to add gussets. It's not just going to be a straight, arm coming off of there. It's going to have brackets and something, but that will just be good enough to get me started and figure this thing out. So what I did before I took the links off, guys, is I just took this is the passenger side. Actually, I'm going to write that down. And I just kind of held this up like here. Said, I want the center of this to be basically right where that mark is. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure that mark to the end of, I think I'll probably do the end of the pipe, or I might do to the end of this. I'm not sure. But I have this piece of steel right here, has some holes drilled into it that I don't really care about those, although they are the right size. But I'm going to use this and just essentially make a bracket to come up like this, or a tab. I'll do a tab on the other side, and then I'll have my mount for my shocks. And so I just need to measure that, and it's looking like, I think I'll just go off the end of the pipe bung. So that mark was at 2 1/8, but I'll probably just move it to 2 inches, because all that's going to do is give me extra clearance, and I will take that. And my tab should be fine pushing that. I don't think I'll have an issue. But yep, I'm going to start with that. I'm going to find out the width of this, which is basically 1.25 inches. And that's leaving some spare play. We may do it a little bit wider than 1.25 inches, just so my shock has some play, which I am okay with, because if this axle does articulate, that'll just allow it to do its articulation a little bit smoother and better. So I just got the links reinstalled on the four-wheeler. You can see the tabs right there and right there. So now I just got to figure out where I'm going to put my shocks. I'm still thinking about right up there. It's just, again, guys, I am not sure how soft these springs are, and I do not want a stiff suspension, guys. I am wanting a nice plush suspension. So if I go, I'll have to show it from down there and straight up. Basically, that'd mean the shock is almost straight up and down. And I'm considering trying to somehow move it in this location. And that will put the shock at more of an angle. And that will put more leverage on it. And therefore, it will be a little more plush. What I'm thinking I'm probably going to do is go where I was originally going to go. And kind of somewhat tack it on there. You know, it's going to be a little stiffer than a tack because I don't want it to break. But I also want to be able to sit on the four-wheeler and just kind of figure out how stiff it's going to be. So, a little slight change of plans. I've decided that instead of making a bracket, one come off of this side and come out to the shock, and then making a separate one that welds onto the frame out here and comes out, I got rid of the battery box that was right here, so now I can run a solid bar all the way across, which will improve strength, especially since it's going to be out so far on that one side. And then this will come up here and we'll mount our bracket on. Just before I get this welded in, guys, I figured I'd show you. So I got that bar clamping going across with vice grips. And yes, this one's sticking out way past. And what I did is I just kind of held the shock up there. This is hard to do one-handed. So I just held that up there and kind of leaned it in just a little bit. And as you guys can see, it's lining up great. And I did the same with the other side. I actually did that side first to make sure, and now I'm just about to tack this in. I'm not going to fully weld it. I want to test and see how my suspension is going to be. So I just found this piece of angle iron, and I already have it marked to where I'm going to cut it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it, and it's going to fit right in there and go on the back side, because I noticed I have this back on the hoist again because I actually took it off, but I noticed that you can see how this is longer on that side. It was starting to bow in, and so by putting this bar, this angle iron here, it will like strengthen that bar a lot and make my suspension mount a lot better. So I'm gonna get that welded in. I also gotta finish welding up my brackets right here. And I don't quite like how my suspension is setting. So I'm actually probably gonna weld in some tabs to mount the suspension somewhere further up. And that will put it at a greater angle. And yes, I know it's leaning back. I don't really think that's much of an issue. So I'm not too worried about that. I need to look into that, but I don't think that's going to be an issue with them leaning back. And if they lean back even more, that's going to put more leverage on them, so therefore my suspension will be softer. And the four-wheeler is at an angle right now. Now, for granted, the hoist is holding it up, but it's still at an angle. And it levels out pretty close when you sit on it, but if anything, I want it just a teeny past level. And that will help this thing pop wheelies a little bit easier. I got the piece of angle iron welded on. Welds aren't too pretty, but they'll be functional, and I'll get it ground down once I actually take this thing apart and get ready to paint it. I also made other shock mounts. You can see there's the old ones. I moved it up a little bit, and that made the suspension a lot softer, and it sits at a better ride height. I also, just real quick, cut the muffler on this thing because, it needed to be short enough because it went out to basically the end of the frame. And I cut it, and I got lucky, guys. I cut it right where it has this little propeller looking thing. I don't know what the real term for it is. But if you're wondering, this ring it stops like a 1/2 inch in there, so I'll probably just grind it down, or I don't know, do something weld like a ring around here so you don't have this gap. But I got lucky and I cut it at the perfect spot, because I think I'll just leave it like that and run it like that. So now I just gotta figure out kind of how I want my seat and how all that's gonna work. And I actually kind of got on it, and I already roughly picked out a seat location, which will be right about there. And that, I think, will be right, because I'm fairly small, and I gotta account for my, growing room. And so I've been having my dad sit on this, and we've been figuring out where we think we want it to be and where it will kind of be comfortable as far as leg room and all that. Now, we did find out that, unfortunately, I will have to cut this plastic, so this plastic will get cut off, and that'll help make room for your hips, is really what that's going to enable. So I think what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to get the plastic cut and then start mounting the seat. And then once I get the seat mounted, I'll get the tank mounted, and then we'll mount the rear plastics. I put the seat on roughly where I wanted it, and I actually made some rubber blocks to go underneath the seat, so you have a little bit of cushion besides the suspension. And then I just kind of lightly secured it down, and these tabs I had stuck on there, and I set the seat down and just welded the tabs where they were, and that's how you know they're guaranteed to fit. And then I just quickly ground down the welds a little bit, just to make sure they wouldn't interfere. And I also put a piece of jean over that, so they don't get, so the welding little dot, the little balls that formed didn't burn a hole in my brand new filter. But there you have it. I'm gonna get my seat mounted on, and then we gotta figure out the fuel tank, but I'll get with you then. Well, guys, gonna have to call it a night for today, and all I really got done was get the seat mounted. That thing is in there solid, pretty happy with it. So you saw I had those blocks. It's hard to convey, but I actually made the fronts thicker and the rears thinner. And this is because the seat naturally, it just sits very flat, and I was afraid you'd kind of feel like you're falling out the front of it sometimes. So by leaning it back, it just feels better. Now, I did notice, since this thing is going to pop wheelies, I was thinking about this, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the back of that seat. So you would risk, it flexes. I don't know how well it showed that, but I'm worried that I would break the seat when I pop the wheelie, even though you're kind of holding yourself up with the handlebars. Like, I get it, because, on a normal four-wheeler, there's nothing on the back to hold you, but since there is on this, there's definitely weight transfer to it. So I'm thinking about putting a bar that runs around the cross, not right up against it, but maybe like a 1/4 inch gap. So that way, and I may even put some foam in between there too, just so you have a little bit of flex, so it's not like you hit a brick wall or something, but it still supports. So that's kind of the plan there. Gas tank, I kind of just roughly held it up here. It's going to be a little interesting. Looks like it's going to have to be offset, because I don't know if I can show it. Here we go. So that fuel bowl is on one side, and that fuel bowl lines up right in the middle of the chassis, which kind of sucks. It's going to be on this side. And the carburetor, or the fuel inlet, is right down there, that little nipple. So don't have much to go with the tank, but it's just going to be interesting. Luckily, gravity will work in my favor, so I don't have to worry about that. But mounting the fuel tank is going to be just a little bit tricky to get figured out, but not too hard to actually get it done. And after I get that fuel tank mounted, probably going to go straight to the rear plastics. I was going to do rear plastics, then tank, then seat, but I think this is the better way, because don't get me wrong, I want this thing to look good. Like, I really do. And I don't want to sacrifice too many looks for comfort. I know that's the opposite of what you usually go. But for this, to me, the look is really important. But there is a certain point where, okay, I want to be able to go out and ride this with my friends for an hour and not feel like I'm dying, And my legs, I don't want them to be terribly cramped. So that's kind of why I did the seat first. Everybody else is going, well, crap, I would have done the seat first anyhow, And I get it. But I'm just trying to give you guys an idea that I am really wanting this thing to look good, even though my welds are complete dog crap and ruin the look of it. But I figured I have some leeway as far as that goes. It's not too critical on the looks. So there's that. But guys, this is really coming along. This thing will, I'm feeling pretty good about this project. So hopefully by the end of the series, it all turns out all right. But that's it. I think this is probably a solid week and a half into the actual build of the four-wheeler, like of the custom stuff. I've been doing engine work for the last, I started this project essentially a month ago, a month and a half ago actually at this point. But a lot of that was engine work, and there's plenty of YouTube videos that show the engine work on these Polaris 400 two-stroke engines, so I wasn't too worried about it. Mr. Fix-It is the guy who I kind of watched to help me figure out my engine. Really recommend him. I'll give him a shout out, but that's why I didn't really show much of the rebuild process, just because there was no need to. Now, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments, and I will be able to answer probably a good chunk of them. I will say, just for a recommendation, if you guys don't have Facebook and you guys don't want to get Facebook because, that's social media, I get it. I get that. But the Facebook groups, that is some of the most helpful stuff I've ever done. I am in multiple groups, but I'm in a group that is just designated for these Polaris 400L two-stroke engines. They're unbelievably helpful, and I've never been left stranded, really, in those groups. There are so many experts in there that can help you out. I mean, I probably asked 20 so questions about this engine, and it's just the Facebook groups, guys, has been really helpful. If you guys don't want to get Facebook for the social media part, but just for the groups alone, getting Facebook is so worth it. So there's just a little, little branch off of the actual topic in front of us here. But that's it for part one. I don't know how long this is going to turn out to be, but hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching. And consider subscribing. Whether you think I'm worth it or not, that's up to you, but appreciate it.